Hello, everyone. Welcome in the new year. And I'm so glad that the returning guest and my first guest this year is Susanne Marie. And I'm so happy because I kind of knew I sort of had blank head and I didn't know what we were going to talk about.
Mhm.
And I sat here 5 minutes before we started, and I thought I just knew that once I sit down with her, something's gonna come up. And I didn't have to wait long because within the first minute or two, Susanna just mentioned that she just wrote down these like topics on a piece of
Yes,
paper. And here we are. We have topics to discuss. Hello.
right. Perfect. Perfect. It was in the gestalt. It was
Yes,
floating around
it
for
was
us to
totally floating.
land
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
It was floating around and it's not been floating. It clearly, funnily enough, it's not just been floating around for you, but it's been floating around in my space, this particular subject
Yeah. Obviously, yeah.
as well. Yeah, please let me
Well,
know what you wrote down and what we're gonna talk about.
well, I'm glad I'm happy to be here with you. I so enjoyed our last conversation and it
Me
was so
too.
lively and you have so much vitality and I just was looking forward to another chance to connect.
Thank you.
So
I'm so
here we
happy to be
are.
here with you. Yeah. You said just before we started recording, was that actually that there are two things that you're being asked about very often, and they seem like the same, they sound like the same questions, but they are actually two different questions. So yeah, maybe we can take it
Yeah.
from there.
Yes, we had two different questions that we can enter, okay? And one is what is it like to wake up, which comes first, really. And then the other one is what does liberation feel like? So one evolves into the other, right? The first one is what is it like to wake up? Can you even remember? That's the thing. Because time goes by and integration takes place and it gets normalized and all that.
It's so interesting that you're asking this question because had I not been working on the book,
Yeah.
it would have been very difficult for me to talk, like more and more difficult to talk about the waking up part.
Yeah.
Precisely because with the book I'm still reflecting, I'm still kind of connecting the dots and making sense because I have to like because I'm writing about it. So
Yeah.
inevitably it's sort of present,
Yeah.
in sort of my thoughts, right? But had I not been writing it, it would have been very difficult. It's become because it's so I even said something to someone recently that we were talking actually about liberation. So we're kind of like sort of jumping around. But I said that there are times when I feel like actually nothing ever happened. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like it's so settled and sort of or the ordinariness and what isness of just life and humanness as it is that it's almost like I'm not saying that nothing happened, but it really feels almost like it's not as important as it used to be at the time as all of that was unfolding. So yeah,
Yeah.
but please,
The contrast. Well, the
yes,
contrast.
yeah,
It's not so much of a contrast. I would
mm,
maybe say that initially, I think that when we
mm-hmm.
have awakening, which is kind of like a different types of awakening experiences, right? That the contrast makes it feel like this big aha, this big change and shift in dimensional shift, right? The way we operate and how we see ourselves and who we take ourselves to be, that self sense. I would say that what does it feel like to wake up is progressive, right? And more of a verb, waking up, right? Waking up for
Totally. It's a verb. Yeah, totally. I see it totally as a verb. But actually, I just want to say, for anyone, if you haven't watched my previous videos, Susanna actually is sharing a lot of her journey in terms of like the waking up. Please do watch that. But if you were to talk about it in sort of like the gist. Because a lot of people I know that they're afraid because they're hearing a lot of scary stories about, people going kind of crazy and sort of feeling like they're falling apart, feeling like, they
Mhm.
don't know what's going on with them. And so it can get turbulent for many people. Can you tell us if that was the case for you at any point? And was it like ebb and flow? Or was it, what was it like?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Maggie. I wasn't planning on going into my story, but we have
Hmm.
to somehow use ourselves because when we're saying what does it feel like to wake up, we're using ourselves and our memory. No, it was never really that turbulent. There were a few moments, of like bigger chunks letting go of the separate self and being, trusting entering the unknown. You know, the true feeling for me of what it feels like to wake up is it feels good. it feels it feels like a big relief. Let's just be honest. Setting
Yes,
aside
of course.
the turbulence and the
Mm-hmm.
fear, that's not what it feels like to wake up. That's a
Mm-hmm.
projection
Mm-hmm.
onto what waking up really is.
Mm-hmm.
Waking up is getting out of the quagmire of the separate self and stepping out of Maya, out of being lost in the
Mm-hmm.
world
Mm-hmm.
and the collective pain body, coming back home inside and feeling undivided is a wonderful thing. So that in itself is not scary. Letting go of these these what we took ourselves to be stable, to be the separate self, the how we know ourselves, that can be scary for people. But that's the whole point, is like, that fool card in the tarot.
Yes.
Now he's stepping into the unknown, he's stepping into the
Yes.
it's this, well, actually in the Osho Zen deck, it's a great non-dual deck. I'm not an Osho person, but that deck, that tarot
There's
deck,
an Osho tarot deck?
it's called Osho Zen. Yeah.
I've never
Some
heard of that
some
one. I'll
some
definitely
um
check it out.
some of its students made it a good while ago, and it is the most beautiful non-dual deck. And the image of the Fool card is amazing. It's the perfect card for what we're
No
talking about.
way.
It's this kind of androgynous, which I like, kind of being, male, female, stepping off a cliff into the unknown, just stepping into, and there's pink cloud, pinkness catching him, and he's got a flower in his hand, like he's lost in wonderment and amazement, and he's just like, or she's like, this is this is the direction of the mystery that I want to go in, and it's calling, and I have a yes. My yes is making me step into the unknown and with trust. And and then one passes through that passageway of leaving behind the known, leaving behind
Yes.
this idea that we need to be a separate self in order to function and make things work. So that's just the initial first kind of
Mm-hmm.
step. And the mind goes into the unknown.
Yeah.
And then what catches you is just vastness. You're stepping into the vastness of your own being. And
Yeah.
this laughter that you and I can share, we're sharing from that place, Maggie. We're sharing from how safe it is and how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think one of the kind of most beautiful observations over the past few years is just speaking of the verb of like waking up, is
Yeah.
how despite the commonalities amongst all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life and so on, how this is such a beautifully unique journey for everyone, and including what that feels like, including whether this is turbulent or not turbulent, whether it is kind of quietly kind of creeping up on someone or coming with a bang, you know? I mean, there's just so many different
Mhm.
quote unquote avenues, so to speak, and
Yeah.
paths. And I see such a beauty because I've only entered the territory of knowledge about awakening after the shifts have taken place, like
Mm.
in sort of properly. And I was first amazed how much there is of kind of rigid holding on to ideas about how this works and
Mm.
how it should play out and what you know, even what an awakened person should be like, how they
Mm.
should behave. Like there's like a whole new persona that's being created by
Yeah.
various traditions and various
Yeah.
stories and things like that. And
Yeah.
I don't think I don't see anything wrong with that per se, but I
Uh-huh.
think it's really good to be aware when in that journey we're kind of like buying into this or like adopting these ideas and thinking that
Mm.
that's how it's supposed to be rather than being more in tune with where life takes us and wants us this to happen to us, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I was really amazed, honestly, that people teaching about enlightenment, like even I, without the knowledge about awakening, you know, like I'm talking about the scriptures and traditions and stuff like that. I remember knowing that like Buddha was always talking about to not like mistake the finger for the moon, the finger pointing to the moon. But and yet I thought, oh my God, like everybody's talking about the finger. Everybody's so obsessed with like what this
Well,
finger
I
is.
really love how you're saying this, Maggie. It's very you came to it with a lot of innocence and freedom. You know that Krishnamurti he wrote a book called Freedom from the Known,
Freedom from
and
the known. Yes.
yeah, we
Yes.
have to enter the unknown. And I mentioned that about the full card, and then we got to stay there in some way. It's called beginner's mind and Zen. Okay, you got to stay there and not form again around an identity of the spiritual self now or the spiritual practice or the tradition that you are drawn to or came out of or are led to with a teacher. The real teachings, as you said, are don't pay attention to the finger pointing to the moon. Always come back to yourself, right? To what in India, they call the Satguru, which is the guru that lives within you. The Sat, it lives here, the truth guru. Sat is truth in Sanskrit. And run if you come across a teacher who says, follow my finger. This is the only way. This is the, you know
Yes.
what I mean? Because we'll get locked back in place and we'll lose. Guess what? The difference between we were going to, and we can still go there, we'll get there.
Yeah. Tell
With
me, tell me.
waking up, what leads from waking up to liberation is not getting stuck in some kind of another eddy of identity. You
Yeah.
have to have an open hand and not get reoriented because it's kind of like a gravitational pull, the consciousness. It can go back
Mm.
into seeing itself as an object
Yeah.
and turning that and coming back into an identity, and people would call it the ego. I don't use that word, but the ego self. So it can get reformulated because awakening, as you say, is a verb, as we said, and it's ongoingly letting go into the unknown and being big in that open mind wonder, open eyed wonder, open heart wonder. If I really don't know what it is really got to be the mantra. I don't know what I am. I don't know what this is. You know, can you stay there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think the mind has this pull. It's how it keeps itself safe, like this kind of superficial kind of sense of safety that for as long as I know, I feel safe. And therefore, if I don't know, if I don't have the ultimate answer, if I don't have the from what the A to B is going to look like and all of that, like it just it's so destabilizing and can feel like, right? So I think a lot of that waking up journey is kind of getting leaning into the uncomfortableness, the initial uncomfortableness, that's probably not even a word, of not knowing.
Yes, absolutely. The uncomfortableness. I think that is a word. We're, if not, it is. But yes, I agree. It's
Yeah,
it's it's like you're stepping out of these lanes, and it's actually these, you know, these lanes that the mind has of neurologically of knowing itself. These are familiar lanes, and
yeah,
in Sanskrit they call them vasanas. So vasanas are these are conditioned patterns, the ways of
right.
being. So then it's like these beliefs. So everything gets to be looked at. What is it like to wake up? Well, everything will be looked at. Your beliefs, what you believe to be true, how you do relationship, um, how you take care of yourself. Everything gets reoriented around truth. And truth is free of, is not a condition. It's not a formulated state. It's unbound, it's an unconditioned state.
Yeah. It's not an intellectual truth or, yeah.
No, that again is,
It's like,
the trash can, the intellectual truth
yeah,
will put you back in a gravitational field of identity. And that's why, there's nothing wrong with maps, these spiritual maps of different traditions. There's all kinds of maps. This happens, you wake up to
totally.
this, and then this and this, and they have words for it. And you may find yourself in there, but I've seen people actually limit their experience trying to fit into a map, like, oh, I'm in this phase, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm with you on that one. And that's coming from a person who like had no clue and kind of started educating myself sort of afterwards and like because it actually helped me connect the dots and understand my experience, like how it fit in into what's being said about
Perfect.
it.
Perfect.
And so I actually see beauty in like lots of traditions and all sorts of like I love all the esoteric and the mystical and everything. I think there's such a beauty in all of that. And I think that there's nothing wrong with the knowledge about awakening. There's nothing wrong with the various descriptions of the stages of awakening and stuff like that because I can tell you for sure that there was a point in my journey that it was what I was experiencing was so scary, but what made it even more scary is that I really had no idea what was going on with me.
Yeah.
And I know that had I met you, for example, and I just shared with you where I was at and what I was experiencing, you would have recognized that and you would be able to say, it's okay. You're here and like this is normal part of this journey and it's gonna be fun or something like I know that it would have made a huge difference to at least I'm not saying that it would have prevented me from suffering, but it would have shed the light as to like what was going on. So I think that knowledge is very useful. I just think that when it becomes this almost like this rigidity around it, the holding on to it as though this knowledge is the ultimate truth. um
Yeah.
that's where the trouble I think that the trouble starts. And it's kind of funny because I've noticed that a lot of people have this like profound awakening out of what I would say out of their identity. So for the first time they see themselves as like, oh, like this is
Hmm.
body and what I thought of myself, like it's not that. But then they enter this like tradition or scriptures or knowledge or communities, and they
Mm.
basically swap one conditioning that they just woken up from and
Yeah.
suffer what it is and swap it into a new one. It's almost like the spiritual identity kind of a thing.
Yes. Yes, I totally see that.
and then get sort of trapped in it. And like you said, trying to, depending on what knowledge they kind of absorb, is they try to like fit in, like where is it that they're at. And I don't think there is a linearity to the stages, I think, because I can see linearity even in my own journey looking back,
Mhm.
there was like a thing, there was an intelligence to the whole unfolding,
Mhm.
but there
Mhm.
was a lot that was not linear about it at all. It was all over the place.
Sure. Yeah, it's unique for you.
Right? So that's what I'm saying. It's still unique to everybody. Right?
It is. What you were saying, Maggie, is I needed also at different stages of my waking up journey, I needed
Mm-hmm.
context.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky that I reached out to a teacher, two teachers and another one too. So maybe three teachers for a brief period just to help with that context. And in fact, it was just even one session, or if it was just one sentence, it put it a good teacher or a good pointer or a good friend, a spiritual friend who really knows
Mm-hmm.
the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, doesn't have to be a teacher, can help support the context, even though we are all so unique. And I wanted to give a real life example. So my kids were little. They were like 3 and 5, and I was in Northern California, and I was waking up to a deep, deep emptiness. It was right before Unity came in, and so things were really being deconstructed at a very deep level. And it was such a beautiful unfolding that was taking place. But there was this one moment where I was like I was putting food out for my kids, these little kids, and I looked out the window and I was just in this kind of falling through um just any landing place, believing anything to be true. That's where I was at, just falling while I was, showing up as a parent. So there was this interesting kind of, I don't know, just sort of this realities bumping up against each other, of needing to be something
Wow.
for people, my children, and also nothing falling through all what I took as real. And I just looked out the window and I saw a raven on a plum tree. And the raven was eating a plum. And what I knew inside was the the raven was empty, the plum was empty, and the tree was empty, and all of it was happening. You could also say have that experience from a unity point of view, but I was in this falling through everything, and it was just this beautiful seeing of this interconnection, but through with an emptiness at the core. And then I proceeded to put the ketchup into the freezer because I was sort of, you know what I mean? And like even walking was interesting. So I thought I'm going to call one of my mentors who I saw
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
Berkeley now and then. She had been a Buddhist nun, and she was a non-dual teacher, but
Mm-hmm.
very low key, very beautiful, mature woman. Really appreciated her. And she answered, she says, I never answer the phone, but here you are. You know what I mean? Just this like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I told her that what was happening. And she said the most beautiful thing. And I just want to share this with you and with everyone listening, because this is how the right words at the right moment can help us with something that could end up being really scary and difficult to integrate. She
Yep.
said, oh, with this beautiful, beautiful, magical words, you called to celebrate, didn't you? You called to
Wow.
celebrate. And it just put it all like I could have gone into fear. It,
Fear.
it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't quite there, but she just said the right words. So it stayed in wonder. It stayed in,
Mm.
with an open-ended all is well, all is well. You can, what I mean, like with this trust, like you can do this. You can put the
Yeah.
ketchup in the right place. You can while you're having this deep, profound shift, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the power of us meeting one another and also reaching out. I've worked with people, Maggie, who wait almost too long to reach
Yes.
in the sense that what is really too long? Well, maybe they suffered for a year or two being alone and not knowing that what they were
Yeah.
going through was actually really, really, um, really part of the journey and safe, and that they could like go into it instead of, holding on, resisting, being afraid. What I mean? Kind of putting
Yeah.
on the brakes, of disappearing. And
Yeah.
that's what it's like to wake up, right? Is we disappear. And then what's real gets to make an appearance when
Yeah.
we leave behind what's untrue, increasingly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also something that came through, like there is, at least in my experience, there was a point at which there was this like what I would call like a palpable momentum
I like that.
where it felt like now I call it a surrender, but then I would call it a massive emotional breakdown.
Oh,
But that breakdown was really now I call it like it was a moment where life surrendered me. It was almost like it felt like trying to hold on to something and trying to still control it, even though you kind of know that you're like losing the grip.
uh-huh.
And, it was like I was like with my fingertips, like holding on to whatever sense of control I thought I still had of managing life, managing my state,
Uh-huh.
managing,
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and it just went. It was a palpable sense of something just something lost its grip. And I think it was like this sense of like control, trying
Hmm.
to control trying to control anything. It was like but it was so palpable that I described this moment of like finding myself almost on like a raft on the river that was
Yeah.
like pulled by this current and there was no going back. I just knew that there was no going back, but I had no idea where I was going. I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea where I was going from
Sure.
that moment on,
Yeah.
and that momentum wouldn't stop
Hmm. Yeah.
until I think what we call the liberation. There would have
Yeah.
been this tiniest, tiny, just believe me, in between then and liberation, I thought twice that I arrived.
You're so cute. Laughing at yourself.
You know? And it's good because it actually came with a lot of like hidden arrogance,
Uh-huh. Sure. Oh, good.
you
Good for
know?
you. Yeah, yeah. We might as well bring it out.
I'll be
Bring
honest
it,
with you. No,
bring
it
it out
really,
of
and I
hiding.
was humiliated by a teacher in a way that I'm most grateful because she
Mm-hmm.
didn't mean to humiliate me at all, but it was
Mm-hmm.
like my arrogance basically came to the light
Mm-hmm.
and it surprised even me. I don't think it surprised her, but it surprised me because I didn't even consider, I'm not hugely, like, I don't consider myself a hugely generally arrogant person, but I was like, it was, but it was the best thing that happened, because someone just showed me, like, girl, you have a
Yeah.
way to go. And if you are even at, and this is what I like, I love the incredible role of a teacher who's there, so to speak, because they'll know where you're at even by the virtue of the kind of questions you're asking.
Mhm.
Right? And it's like, and she was like, and she just said to me, if you're asking this question, it means there's more for you to see. And I knew that she was right. So I felt really humiliated,
Oh, well, good,
you
good for
know?
you for truth having popped out with questions.
Totally. It was
Yeah.
painful and so embarrassing because it happened like in public and everything, you know?
Oh, that's so good though. It burned up. It burned it up. Shh.
Oh my God, it burned it up. I
Yeah.
like my cheek, including my cheeks, like flashing and all the,
Oh, do you have that on camera? Yeah.
full on embarrassment. I was so
Yeah.
ashamed. It was
Oh,
just, awful. But I'm so grateful for it. It was one of the most pivotal moments in the journey, you see, because I
yeah.
can absolutely see, maybe we
Mm,
can talk about that because I can absolutely see how at certain stages, especially when you're no longer resisting the emotional discomfort, you're no longer like you're no longer sort of resisting discomfort, let's say.
sure.
How, and you've had these shifts and emptinesses and unities and whatever, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's so easy to think that you arrived.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I mean, it's so innocent, by the way. Like, I mean, it's really innocent,
Of course. It is.
But it's so useful to know that you didn't.
Well, once you step through that
Yeah.
threshold of another place that you've landed and thought
Mm,
that that's it, staking a claim like on the moon, putting your
yeah.
little
Yeah.
flag as if the moon belongs to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here I am. And
Right?
a little island forms around that. But the whole sea is waiting. The whole sea's there saying, yeah, this won't last. This belief that you've arrived, it's not going to last. And another wave will come, washing that away. And
Yeah.
you become more, you disappear into nothing more deeply. I think it keeps coming, like the waves of truth. They keep coming and washing away more of that separate self.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people right now who are even sharing on YouTube. And they think they've arrived and there's still more
Yeah.
to come. And the problem is the reason why I even say that is not to make anyone wrong or shame anyone. It's more that there's a reason why traditionally, um, you know, people who wake up are asked to wait for, it used to be 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
wait before sharing. If you feel even like not everyone's meant to share, there are people who are deeply awake who don't end up teaching and they do what they're doing in life, that they're where they're called, to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. But if one is wanting to come out and share the Dharma, as they say, whatever tradition you're in, um, it's got to be integrated and embodied and make sure that it's coming from a really the true humbleness has really taken place where there's no one there left to be humbled even.
To be humbled. Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
problem with staking a claim and already sharing, it can have some juice and vitality and all that to it. But the thing is that when we share prematurely,
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of locking ourselves in place to not grow more because the identity is formed that we're done. And
Mm-hmm.
how would it look to the outside if we were to, admit that we're not all the
Yeah.
way done? So it kind of like it's a setup, to be locked in place and not grow. So then we get static and then it gets it festers with staticness. It's not moving, it's not growing.
It's
And the
not
awakening is
fresh.
not
It's not
deepening.
fresh. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
longer fresh. It's a right. It's a memory. It becomes more and more of a memory versus the freshness of the open-eyed wonder of there's no end here. So that's the only reason why, I feel actually kind of sometimes I actually feel sort of sad for some of the
Hmm.
people who come out prematurely because I think, this is not in your best interest. And one's own best interest is to don't stake a claim, don't feel like you're done. Let it
Hmm.
marinate, let it integrate. There are more awakenings to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're locking ourselves in place, where is that energy going to come from to be able to, freedom needs to be where we live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's just something that I've noticed. Um, so this beginner's mind and innocence of like, I actually don't really know. And maybe I shouldn't really talk too much about it until there's more real depth of here, because it's good to not know. It's really, really, it's the
Yeah.
right attitude.
Which is why I have not seen many of those kind of scenarios, but my heart rejoices when I hear someone who has been sort of in the public eye, let's put it this way, whether the audience was big or small doesn't matter, but they've had some kind of an audience and they
Yeah.
come out and they said, you know what, I thought I
Yes.
was there,
Yes.
but I actually haven't. And actually, this is what I'm going through. Honestly, Susanna, my heart just rejoiced. Like, while other people kind of jump at that person and,
Yeah.
they're not very nice, let's put it this way. And they're like how they
Mhm.
comment on this person and, uh,
Yeah.
right? My heart
Yes.
rejoiced because I'm like, that, see, to me, like, let's quote unquote, that's enlightenment.
Yes.
That you come out and you're just being honest. You know what I mean? You're just being
Sure.
honest. And rather
Yes.
than keeping up because I can totally see, like you said, if you lock yourself in and then
Yeah.
you're grappling with this whole other self-image, separate self
Mhm.
story, and the fear of coming out and saying, right? Because you have all these people looking up to you. So am I going to
Yeah.
keep up the pretense or am I going to come? I mean,
Right.
I can only imagine how difficult that must be
Yeah.
because hello, awakened, liberated or not, you're still human. You know what I mean? Like that stuff is going to
You're
be
going to go
coming
through
up.
messiness. Yeah.
Yeah.
You won't let yourself go through the messiness, that is needed to really be dismantled. So that's just it. It's not just even teaching, it's also in one's own personal life. Just
Yes.
to realize that you're going to go through like the rock tumbler, a
Yep.
tumbler, and it's going to tumble and tumble and tumble
Yep.
until it's really done and pops out smooth and where everything's can slide off of it.
Yep.
you know, so and that, entering into the language of liberation, to me, liberation really is taking place when everything is allowed to be. And when something even feels like it's difficult to allow it to be, there's an allowance to allow that to be.
Or because there's like a lot of talk about resist, because to me that was massive, it was like the what I call like the dropping away of like the fundamental resistance to what is. And the reason why I say fundamental, because then people, it's so easy to take it and go, oh, so I shouldn't resist. And I'm like, no, it's literally like not even resistance to the resistance that may arise in the experience. You know what I mean? Like it has no
Beautiful.
edges. It
There
has
you
it
go.
has no like it
Yes,
just
there
has
you go.
no edges. There's no rule
Mhm.
book that says,
No.
no, it's like this. No, it's like
Yes.
that. There's no rule book here, you
Right,
know?
right, right, right. Beautiful. No rule book, no edges. Um, Nothing takes away from the fact that everything's that. Nothing, including
Nothing. Nothing.
including being confused.
And
It
I think
never.
and I think that's
uh,
one of the ways I think, how we talked about the process of awakening as opposed to like liberation in that there's no, because I was actually asked this question, how do you know?
Mm.
right?
Mm. Yeah.
And my answer was this ridiculous because I didn't know how to. I really have trouble conveying it. That's another thing. Like this is the bit where I run out because it's such an intimate thing that it's impossible to actually convey what the direct experience is like. At least though for me, it's I always run out of like because everything I say is like. "Mm, it's sort of like that, but like not really, it's like kind of, but the first thing I came up was like, there's no doubt, but there
Yeah.
is no certainty either. Because both things sort of belong to it's the mind that doubts and it's the mind that needs certainty. So like, and it kind of blows
Beautiful.
all these thing out.
That's
So that's
beautiful.
why we can't talk even about an arrival point because it just sounds so ridiculous.
Well, I just want to say, Swami Satchidananda, who brought integral yoga to this country, he wrote a book called Beyond Words.
Hmm. Right,
And
exactly.
that says it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Why you can't find the words, Maggie, is it's beyond words. And that's why lots of people who go into the beyond words place of living this, living
Mhm.
truth, living as reality, they fall off the map of even just speaking about it. It's only a small percentage who are speaking about it because they're called to by life itself. And others, I could have well been that one of those, but I'm not. Others just go and want to, garden for the rest of their lives, which
Totally.
actually I
Yes.
love, or serve tea, or work as a kindergarten teacher, or write whatever they're doing.
Whatever they're doing.
And
Yeah.
it's because not everyone is meant to, try to find words to speak about it. So it's kind of an artist in motion, kind of like, that calligraphy of the the Zen beautiful
Oh,
kind of ink
yes. Yeah.
drawings.
Yeah.
And they do them in, it's this moment, it's some art in the moment. It's fluid art in the moment. And that's what we're trying to live and is just art in the moment, being in the moment. And so what does liberation feel like? Okay. Oh, I'll just here we go. Um, can I just go garden? No. Let me just walk my dog. Um, it feels like no landing place without even thinking about it ever. It's so now, 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 now without anyone in the now, and it's meeting them. It's the moment meeting itself. It's all those words without an I in there.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and there's no more reflecting on what awakening is, right? There's no more thinking about it except for
Yeah.
when we're called to speak about it.
I mean, it's interesting. I think I would say that there is no, I think in comparison, because I'm still going back to that question of like,
Yes.
perhaps by comparison, it's easier to say. There's two things that come to mind. One, there's no attempts to do anything about what you're experiencing. In a sense, like you're not like at least like trying to numb or escape what like I don't know. There's no attempt to do anything about what you're experiencing as though
I
this
get
was
it.
wrong, as
I
though
get
there's
it.
something wrong with what you're experiencing.
Right.
Or you shouldn't be feeling this, or you shouldn't be thinking that, or there's none
Sure.
of that narrative.
No. So that's what I call reflecting on it. You know what I mean? So there's no reflecting. It's just pure
Right.
experiencing. So there's no attempt to even to think about it even, right? It's becomes just sort of more of a stream of experiencing versus,
Yeah.
all that secondary looking that takes place with us when you
Yes.
have a separate self there that still, even when we wake up initially, that looking is a habit of mine
Mm-hmm.
to still go, wow, look how this is happening now. It's so different. There's still a habit of looking
Mm-hmm.
and reflecting on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that gap closes. So that self-reflection on what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're saying, what we're doing, that thinking about it in any way, commenting on it, just reflecting on it, it diminishes. Right. Okay, so here we are in the stratas.
Semantics. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
well, not just semantics, Maggie. I
Yeah.
think it's still it's a continuum.
It's a
Waking up
continuum. Yeah.
and liberation. Like the continuum that where I'm at is no more reflection whatsoever. So there's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
continuum that takes place as the functioning becomes so
Mm-hmm.
seamless, and that
Mm-hmm.
continuum happens organically. The
So can
seamlessness.
I just ask, because like let's say for example, if you are writing a book,
Hmm.
in order to write, won't you reflect?
Yeah, it's a very interesting way that reflection happens now. It's more
Yeah.
like um, I saw you do it a bit ago. While you were
Mm-hmm.
talking, you were looking up.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like this. There's a retrieval. I don't know.
Retrieval. Yeah.
It's retrieving information. I don't know how much it's
Yeah.
reflecting.
But that's what I mean. It's like the reason why I say semantics, because I think sometimes we can use the same words and mean different things, and sometimes we use different words but mean the same thing. So like I'm just trying to like sort of
Yeah,
clarify.
it's yeah.
But the other thing is like I actually have an example. I don't know if it's useful at all
Hmm.
of again coming out of conversation with someone about this. Like before, for example, I would have certain, let's call it conflicting thoughts and feelings about my family members,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so, and whenever I had some quote unquote negative thoughts
Hmm.
about, or disturbing even thoughts, let alone some really not nice feelings toward my family
Yeah.
members, for example, I would not only feel conflicted about that, I would
Uh-huh.
feel incredibly guilty. And then I would go, oh my God, what does that mean about me that I'm having these thoughts and that I'm having these feelings or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the awakening process, now it's completely different, but in the waking up,
Hmm.
especially after the sort of merging of, let's say, the humanity and divinity sort of together, the
Yeah.
conflict went away.
Uh-huh.
And so it was incredible. Even then, even before liberation, that alone was amazing that I was able to be with both love for my family members and really disturbing thoughts and emotions or feelings that may have arise, and
Yeah.
they coexisted without conflict and
Yeah.
without the narrative about, oh my God, what does that mean about me? Makes me a bad
Beautiful.
person
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that, right? And I think
Yeah.
that this is actually, to me, this is huge. This was a huge part of the waking up, you
Really
know?
good, really good that you're bringing this up because we've so easy to forget these contrasts and these, yeah, how it used
It's
to
only
be.
because I'm writing the book that I can even like, and because I'm seeing people who like remind
Yeah.
me of those
Yeah.
situations, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what's happening because I remember now that this would have been a massive issue, like this internal conflict and ridden with guilt,
Yeah.
for having even certain thoughts and certain feelings, as opposed to the openness to have it all as it
Yeah.
is. Right?
Sure.
Like, and that we can take anything that's disturbing or uncomfortable and replace it, right?
Yeah. Just like right now with the state of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what a real non-dual awakening is what you spoke about, right? The non-dual. Non-dual is that it's able to hold paradoxical realities at once, which is we're here and we're not here. We're spirit and we're form. The
Yeah.
world is in trouble and all is well at the same time. there's a place inside that's all as well for those who know
Fundamentally,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so the non-dual awakening, it resolves the paradox, is what I say, of this conflict of
Mm-hmm.
figuring out how to be with these difficult things at the same time. And it's because one opens to the vastness of that the wholeness that where everything resides. So you open up to unity,
Yeah,
to that which is everything. And that these parts live in there, so conflict can still exist even, right?
totally. Yes.
Right. And not liking someone can exist at the same time loving them
Very much
unconditionally.
so. Yes.
Right. We don't like, and
Yeah.
and still there's unconditional love that is like like and not like lives within this unconditional reality
Yeah.
that is the substratum
Mm-hmm.
of all existence, where everything emerges out of. So you wake up to that substratum, right? To the being, to presence, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
intelligence. And
Yeah.
then all these different parts get to be, that's the messy, that's the part that can be a little messy and all that
Yes.
too. It's like how do I open to the fact that I felt like a victim, you know? How do I
Yeah.
open to the fact that it's hard, I don't know how to forgive? How do I, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
to, because there's something deeper that is an allowance of it all. So it changes things that, though, it changes that is medicine. That allowance is the medicine that helps bring about. Allowance is the medicine of the times, really. It brings that what true reconciliation is, which is deeper than forgiveness,
Yeah.
you know? So the non-dual awakening is what we wake up to, and then to live there and have it be integrated to where it's seamless is what really liberation is, where there's no more question
Yeah. There's
anymore.
no distinction even. I feel like for
Mhm.
me, the distinction between even the divinity and humanity, the relative and absolute, it's sort of collapsed. So
There you go.
it
No
doesn't
more
matter. It
distinction.
just doesn't matter. This is what someone calls it like 1%. Someone said, I've heard someone say about liberation that is like you can have the non-dual awakening and
Mhm.
there's gonna be this 1% like veil of the veil kind of left of that distinction that you can live for the rest of your life with and not even know that it's there because it's so thin. But like but it's monumental, Susanna. It
Yeah.
really is monumental. The difference between no separation and no
Mhm.
distinction is in the direct experience. It's monumental. It's absolutely monumental that.
It is. And I want to just remind ourselves and the audience that we might not even know, you know, that still exists, like you said earlier. The
Yeah.
humbleness of being humbled, of
Yeah.
coming across these whatever lives in that 1%, and to be so devoted to truth that you never hang up a shingle and say, I've fully arrived,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it always needs to be an open doorway where
Yeah.
you're stepping through the threshold without having arrived fully, because you never know, little things, and it can be end up being less than one, it can be a hair,
Yes.
something like Padmasambhava said and I'm terrible with sayings, but I'll try. I
Go
always
on.
get
Go
them all
on.
mixed
Go on.
up, and it's
Go
something
on.
like the freedom, liberation is it becomes in the end as fine as a grain of sand. And even actually like dust, the finest dust.
Just.
And that
Yeah.
one's devotion to truth needs to be, I want to know what that little particle of dust,
At all cost. At
yes,
all
and
cost.
bring it
Yeah.
on, and
That.
being so in love with truth
Yeah.
and truth is in love with truth. It just
Yeah.
it's it's it loves itself so much that it wants nothing in the way. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just want to go back to what you were saying, if you don't mind, because I think it's so important in that, that acceptance without edges, that we talk about, because I'm noticing how much of that even awakening related conditioning is out there. In again, this image that an awakened person, never gets angry, or is never this, is never that, like just um
Mhm.
that this whole new persona is being created in the people's minds that they think that they have to live up to. And that includes even noble things, like noble traits. And this is the biggest trap, also think. Like the noble,
Mhm.
like I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being kind. Like kindness is a lovely thing, okay? But
Mhm.
sometimes I'm not kind, and like maybe in the way I say something, obviously not on purpose or anything like that, but you know what I mean? Like just like I'm human, like I have stuff comes up, and there are people that, I do get angry sometimes when I look at certain situations happening in the world and, things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna pretend, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's this constant waging of the war with what is as it is in your experience. But I
Yes.
feel it's kind of almost fed, like it's kind of perpetuated by a lot of the spiritual teachings.
Yes.
That then you
Yes.
have to become this pure person. You have
Saint.
to
A
like
saint.
a saint, preferably. Yeah.
Yeah. Float, and you don't even touch the ground when you walk in the end.
No,
Yeah.
do not. You don't. You
No.
don't. You don't.
No.
And
And
it creates this
mhm.
other resistance, because then when those feelings
Mhm.
arise or those reactions arise in your experience,
Yeah.
then you immediately wage war with that, because
Yeah.
someone said this is not how awakened person
Sure.
should feel or something. Do you know
I
what I'm
I
talking
totally
about?
get it. Yeah, yeah. And especially if you're encountering somebody who has those ideas, they can even look at you and say, or at me, whomever, and think to themselves, that's not what the idea I have. That's not Ramana, that's not
Right.
Christ, Mother Mary,
Mm-hmm.
whatever projection onto truth, onto reality. And
Yeah.
the thing is that what hurts about that is for themselves, actually, for people who hold that. If anyone hears it has beliefs of what awakening is going to end up looking like. The problem about that is that we can leave ourselves out. We're leaving ourselves out of the picture, meaning that we aren't purified enough. And so then there's the living awakening is being bypassed with an idea of what it's supposed to be like.
Right.
But at the same time, Maggie, and I'm sure have noticed this, that
Mm-hmm.
the deeper you go into that beautiful allowance that welcomes everything as it is, it
Mm-hmm.
does it does have a purifying effect and
Yes.
transformative effect on these rough edges that might still exist in terms of speech, in terms of action, in terms of how we move through the world. Kindness, which is a more like a law of the universe versus a human created, projection, right?
Yes.
But the real kindness comes in, the real care and compassion comes in, the real response to things, which can look like anger, but could just be, it is anger. There is a divine aspect to anger.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's what it is a boundary. And it says, no,
Mm-hmm.
that is not okay. Treating people in that way is not okay. That's the universe saying, no, stop, bad boy, bad girl. You
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
spanking. You know what
This
I
is
mean?
not okay.
That's
That's
not
it.
okay.
Yeah.
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 And so it's not all permission. It's not all divine mother pink fluffy energy. You can get away with anything. That is not the way the universe works.
That's the extreme. kind of position, which I talked to someone about it recently, and I really didn't know how to kind of I struggle to explain that acceptance doesn't mean like passivity or like being like you just
Hmm.
if harm is being done you just sit there because there's nobody here and therefore nobody is doing anything because there's going to be that extreme
Yeah.
non-dual view then thrown at you.
So there's waking up to truth in an kind of abstract, transcendent way, right? And then there's entering back into life with our humanity. And not all teachers who have been even labeled saints, and I'm not saying who that might be,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I actually don't know if they're not even alive. How would I actually know what they're re-entering of the embodiment of an integration into the human being, the
Mm-hmm.
human part, which is also divine. So the nitty-gritty of Maya, the nitty-gritty of being here in the body, in relationships and living a life. Truth needs to permeate and help transform and liberate it. So it's going to have truth is going to have real live in the moment responses to a
Yeah.
situation. And it might just be a big no, stop hitting that child, get in between.
Yeah.
It will, and that's called right action. And living a dharmic life is a right action. Dharmic means a life of truthfulness. You don't have to. I'm not even Buddhist. I just love to use different words because we are everything. We don't have to be
Totally.
in a
Yeah.
certain camp to benefit and use these beautiful teachings and words. Yeah, yeah. It's you know I think that it, it kind of. And I don't want to go into the conversation of it because I actually don't know enough about it because I'm not on that level of understanding
Tell me.
karma. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're talking about, the universe laws of the universe
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of right and wrong on the level of the of truth that is so deep that we're learning how to be responsive of a response of the universe and to be true. But there are deep universal laws that we could even say karma is one of them that is way deeper than a human being's projection of it, you know?
Yep.
Like, oh, that's their karma, that's my karma. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's so intelligently done how the universe operates to be able
Yep.
um to transform and to liberate and to teach, you know what I mean? That I think like that's like a real fundamental aspect. We can even see it just in general, cause and effect. Cause
Yeah.
and effect, right?
I have one more question because to do with liberation, which I am often asked, and I would love to hear a little
Yeah.
bit more from you on that. Because I think there's a lot of confusion around that whole subject of the end of suffering.
Hmm.
Um, and so, because one of the things that people say, oh, liberation and suffering, and I've spoken to people, I can definitely tell in my experience, even though, again, to me, suffering it's something so unique and intimate for every person that it's even hard to describe what it means when someone is suffering, right? Because it's such a unique experience to everybody. So when I know now, I've learned that by talking to people that when they hear end of suffering,
Mm.
they think that this is the end of experiencing any kind of emotional discomfort or even physical discomfort or
Hmm.
just life just being the smooth ride basically and there's
Yeah.
like no challenges and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
can you talk, I would love to hear your take on that.
Well, suffering exists. The Buddha said, old age, sickness, and death are part of our journey. And that's, you know, that just has to do with all creatures. All creatures can suffer. Any creature can suffer. But the thing is that when the separate self, when that center of consciousness in a human being, when it's the separate self sense in the center, when someone
Mm-hmm.
looks and they feel separate, they feel divided, they feel like there's a me here, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
when something takes place that's difficult and challenging and hard, it's like what happens is that it feels like there's a me here that is hurting. It's me. It goes to a center. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm hurting.
Yep. Yep.
I'm
Yep.
hurting. And then there also can be a whole slew of stories and context text that comes up out of that. Like poor me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, life is always doing this. It's so hard. I never get like a slew
Yes, yes, yes. Like the
of
whole
dominoes.
narrative. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, a whole narrative around it, and which creates more suffering because there's more reflection than going on, and it builds up,
Yeah.
and the pain body, it builds up
Mm-hmm.
a result in the body would start to feel pain and contraction, right? So suffering then creates a contraction, and then you feel it in your heart, you feel it in your gut, right? So when we go through waking up, oftentimes there's an undoing process of those contractions that
Mm-hmm.
because the sense of it happening to a me goes away. So then you're just left with the contraction left, the energetic signature of that sufferer. So there's no more sufferer, there's just suffering as a verb, right? Even Jesus on the cross, I'm sure, was suffering. There was no more sufferer. And that's why he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And only someone who has woken up out of the separate self could even say that from that place, of understanding that ignorance is what's causing this, unconsciousness is what causing suffering, making someone suffer. So there's no sufferer anymore, so there's just pure suffering. So suffering then becomes more just like, you know the body hurts,
Yeah.
it's in pain. So you no longer have really even the word so much suffering kind of falls away, the idea of being a suffering individual or whatever. The whole story of that falls away and it just becomes reality now. Like I'm in grief, let's say someone precious dies or your beloved pet or whatever it is, or even
Yep.
grieving the world. So it becomes more of a verb. There's no sufferer, but there's then grieving. There's
Yep.
no sufferer, but there's feeling and it's pain. There's no
Mm-hmm.
sufferer, but there's, missing someone.
Yeah.
So that's the human part, but it's alive, it moves, and it doesn't land and stop and at a center of consciousness with a separate self saying, and there's suffering here. Me,
Yeah. Me.
me.
Yeah. To me, happening to me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. How does that resonate?
It totally resonates. Thank you so much for saying
Yeah.
this. No,
Yeah.
seriously, because it's like, again, I have such trouble um putting it into words. It's again, like I said, it's such an intimate experience that all I can say that the suffering was there and it's no longer there, the way it used to be. But you
Mm.
literally just describe it just because I'm a lover of simplicity, and you just describe it so beautifully and simply.
And
It's that bit. It's not that there is no experience of grief. It's not that there's no sadness. It's not that whatever.
yeah,
It's just that bit, the me that, like, there's nothing, it's just, I call it like pure experiencing without edges. And because there's no resistance to, let's say, the grief, it's literally
yes,
all there is. So
exactly.
it's actually a full on,
Yeah,
it's actually a full on like experience, because there's no edges and no resistance to it, and therefore there's no
exactly.
suffering. Not that there is no
Right.
grief, not that there is no sadness,
Exactly.
right?
There's no story about it, and there's nothing making it wrong and pushing it away. Resistance turns it into a suffering.
Yes,
Resistance.
that's
Rather than
it.
bring it on, here's grief. Grieving,
Yeah.
it has a flavor. You even drop the word. Just go into the sensation
Yeah. Yeah.
of what is what does the sadness feel like?
Yeah.
And is that even bad? Is that wrong? You just
Yeah.
wipe out all the ideas that this should not be here. And then it's just the pure experiencing of the sensation, which the mind starts to stop making wrong because that's a story it told itself.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful. I'm so glad I brought this up because honestly,
me
I,
too.
I I know for the fact that honestly it creates a lot of confusion for people. I didn't even realize that it was such a big deal that when people hear about liberation as the end of suffering, they're
Yes.
imagining a point in time at which, there will be no uncomfortable like experiences. By uncomfortable experiences, I mean grief, I mean sadness, I mean anger, I don't know, whatever anyone deems uncomfortable. But the thing
Yes.
is, though, I think we can take it even farther, that even those labels kind of fall away
Yeah.
of that being uncomfortable, because it's
Yeah.
like um it's
Yeah.
just what is, and so
It
and
is.
so and so, like, it doesn't even matter whether you like it or not. It's like
No.
whether you like or not, what's happening. It's just there, it's just here, whatever it is. And I think this was, to me, this is such a, which is why I love the kind of term. I even changed the name of the channel to like Humanizing Awakening. Because, you know, really, because it brings, if
Oh.
there's something that creates sadness for me, it's just this seeing the suffering that's actually created by the stories about awakening, which is quite
Hmm.
honestly an irony, that like
Yeah.
these ideals floating
Hmm.
around, like, right? And you know when you talk about the Zen, that circle that on the white, the Zen kind of, the black circle that kind of
Hmm.
starts and goes around and comes back. And to me, I have a logo where I put like a little human there at the bottom. So it's like this journey of waking up is like you start as a human and you kind of you come in sort of full circle, and
Hmm.
it's almost without like dumbing it down or anything like that, but it's almost like you're only beginning to know what it means to be fully human, but without resistance,
There you go.
It's like you
Yeah.
start waging war with your humanness,
Yes.
and
Absolutely,
everybody
Maggie.
else's, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the journey of awakening in the end just means actually living our birthright and being here fully without anything lying between us and life. Just that those veils,
Yeah,
uh, being here fully and meeting everything. It's an extremely sensitive, intimate experience, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, I think it really does confuse people a lot when people take on that story that liberation is the end of suffering, and then they put up ideals of mostly dead masters who can't tell you anymore if they what their experience is. You know what I mean? They can't say, "Hang on,
yeah.
what is it the story you're telling yourself about liberation?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's like Ramana had cancer and died of, there's so many teachers and beings, beautiful beings. I love Ramana, by the way. So many beautiful beings who passed away through extreme health issues that must have been very painful.
yep,
And of course there was pain,
yep.
but the sufferer wasn't there anymore per se.
And I just love to talk to anyone who, is basically contributing to humanizing this whole thing.
Hmm.
And by humanizing, again, I don't mean dumbing it down or anything. I just saying this is for everyone. This is
Yeah.
available 24/7,
Mhm.
It's like,
It's
you
real.
know, it's
It's real.
yeah. Really, no, really. Like this is it's not, which is why I'm not even though I generally don't have problem with words, but like even this word attainment, to me is holds such, it's almost like it's an achievement once you get there, or like only some people can attain, as though
Yeah,
whatever it is that we're looking for is, because in order to attain something it has to be apart from, so then you go and attain it. And it's like it's so,
yeah,
someone said it's so close it's hard to see. It's so close that it's actually, you can't see it because it's so close, you know
exactly.
so
It's more of a going backwards, and in Zen they call it the backward step. You take a backward step versus an outward step of attainment.
yeah.
It's a remembering. Yeah, well, I think we're meant to. There was a time that I went through where the deconstruction of words really was taking place, where the meaning needed to be reclaimed by what's true here,
Wow, yeah, can
Meaning.
you talk a little bit about that?
Well, words are created, they s- they say that the English language, you know, was the commerce, a language of commerce.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of duality,
Yes.
in in language. It's all me and you, and object subject related. You know, that's
Yeah.
what the English, there are certain languages like Sanskrit, which are, an ancient language, that are less subject object. They're more like emerge out of oneness. Maybe some original tribal languages, more oneness. You know what I mean? And they also can, some languages are more verb oriented versus, a noun, or they're just more of a verbing, like Native American language is, or more verbing. So there's no real end
Oh,
to things. Like instead of just, you know,
that's
um,
beautiful.
the sun is there, it's really always sunning. The earth is really earthing. So we don't turn it into an object, you know?
That's so amazing.
So there's a relaxing that can happen when words that have been created out of separation, that we've maybe also believed in, and separation has resulted and arisen
Mm,
through believing in these words outside of ourselves. Like something is like, as when you're a child and you are given a ball and this is your ball. You know what I mean? Identity
mm-hmm.
forms around
Mm-hmm.
objects. So all this reclamation starts to take place during the whole journey of awakening. And so the meaning of words get to be returned back to source, where it's undivided. And then the words will be used and they're no longer dividing. You can still reclaim words and use them,
Yep.
and they can carry wholeness, because they're vibrating from a place that doesn't believe in division anymore, even if you're still
Yeah.
using language that's created out of division.
Yeah. Which is why
So,
which is why it gets so tricky, because to talk about it, because like even with the liberation, with there's nobody there to even be liberated.
yeah,
How the hell do you say that? I mean, because like as soon as you, and as soon as you say I, there's something else, and it immediately creates this sense of separation. Because
yeah,
as soon as you put the word and, or the
yeah.
word or just I and something else, immediately there's this I and something else, right? So
Exactly. It's creating separation.
immediately,
I have a friend who just sent me some of her books.
yeah,
She leads dances of universal peace. It's the Sufi dances. Her name is
no,
Connie Zareen Delaney. Anyway, this one book she wrote is called Non-Duality and Native Wisdom, and she speaks exactly about language, the language being different from Native American tradition, and how it's more of a verb. I just wanted to say that it's like it's getting to be more out there about the truth of oneness coming through, and even language can changes.
but it's kind of, we're kind of going back to where we started, because we
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit, how not it's not that there's problem with words, you know. I mean, how else can we freaking communicate? That's what we've got.
Here we
It's
go. Yeah.
just this rigidity of holding on to the meanings, and which is why I was always confused in like the language has been evolving as well. So like what Buddha said and how it was translated and what it meant in the context, for example, that it was said, the cultural context changes meanings over
Yeah.
centuries as well. So it's like, how can you possibly be sure what he meant
We can't
100%
be,
when he said,
no.
you
And can we
can't?
even be sure he said it, you know?
And can we even be sure we said it right? And then there's
Yeah.
people who are embellishing, like humans have the tendency to embellish as well, especially like
Yeah.
artists and storytellers and
Oh,
people who deal with language.
sure.
So all of this, it when I sometimes, you know, I used to be afraid to even like say this, you know,
Mm.
because immediately that was someone equates me saying this with disrespect for the Buddha's teaching, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean, and I don't mean it at all. I love the Buddha's teachings that are out there, and at the same
Yeah.
time I just recognize the fact that they've been translated by multiple people who, this is why we have multiple translations of, say, Bible, because everybody wants to hear something else. You know what I mean? Basically
You
they're
know, so
imposing their
Maggie,
projections.
we can just cut to the chase and remind ourselves really about the
Yeah.
aliveness of the transmission that's taking place in the moment of word. Transmission is really what's happening. It's not really words.
No.
So if we're saying something that is attributed to the Buddha, it's
Mm-hmm.
alive now, hopefully being with the understanding. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
lip service or intellectual,
Yeah.
liberation is the end of suffering, kind of like there's no transmission in that. What's real transmission is, what do you know is true for yourself? What do you know to be true?
And is it alive? Is it alive?
Is alive, and let it come through. Let it be
Yeah.
spoken. And however you say, even if you're saying something to the postmaster, I'd like to blah, blah, blah. The transmission of undivided nature is in the words. It's vibrating.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fun, all this stuff we're talking about.
It's totally fun, all this stuff. But this is what I mean. I see there's such beauty in the fact that we talk about it. It's such beauty in all the different ways people talk about it. I actually want to say, speaking of liberation, and one of my most recent discoveries of the past, I would say maybe 2, 3 months, has been actually seeing how even the after liberation looks different for different people. And that's been incredibly illuminating for me, that there's like there's some people that no longer go through certain things, and there's some people that still go through certain things even after liberation, you know? And it's like,
Mm.
um, I don't want to go like into, I can't like give you the details, but it's just, to me, that's like this life saying again, don't create another rule book about what the liberated person, quote unquote, should be going through or shouldn't be going through. Because that, I think I think fundamentally there's like a sameness. Like when it comes to like the fundamental experience that we touched upon today, I think quite a bit. But in terms of like the human expression of what that human expression then goes on to do, and what it's also different. So that we
Yes.
don't create this other image of what this supposed to look like, you know?
I agree. I never really and I've never seen liberation as something that is a point in time, but more of a continuum. So for me, there's no after liberation.
Yeah, but I think you know what
I
I
mean, I know it's
mean. Yeah.
semantics, okay?
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
just,
yeah.
because I just wanted to respond to how it is for me is a ongoing discovery of this. It's basically for the rest of one's living life out until it's the end of the breath, last breath,
Totally.
is is the journey of life living itself. And that is, I guess, what we would term liberation. Um, but I don't even think about it. Do you?
No.
I don't even think. Yeah, that's like okay. So we're just talking about it for the sake of a conversation. And
Yes,
hopefully
yes.
there's some use in there for people, right?
Yeah.
But liberation, what does it feel like? There's no more contemplation of it.
Yeah. Or the sort of big questions that, like, those kind of questions about the meaning of life that at least I used to grapple with a lot, even from like early
Yeah.
age, it's like or even things like, do we have free will? Don't we have free will? Like all of that stuff is just like,
Hmm.
it's not I don't know, it's just an aliveness of the moment as it is. I mean, there's just, I'm trying to find some kind of, but it's very alive, and it's very just whatever, like it almost feels like everything there is right here, and there's nothing sort of beyond that, so to speak. But again, words really, really, like, I noticed that like there's certain experiences and shifts that you can kind of talk about certain qualities of it. You can kind of
Mm-hmm.
like describe it, but you come to this and it's like,
Yeah.
bleh. It's like,
You know, I do want to say one thing about one thing that it does feel like liberation, uh since we're talking about it, uh that I could see in the landscape of it
yeah, tell
is
me.
that it holds sort of, it understands and doesn't diminish any of the other realities that have come leading up to it, including for other people. Like it understands that one that is wondering about free will. It
Mm-hmm.
understands that it's the one that still feels like there's a separate self there, even though it's
Yep,
those strata still are part of its larger body. It understands, the fear of letting go into the unknown. It understands the bliss
totally.
of presence when you first taste it. It understands
Yep,
being lost in Maya. It understands wanting to be a seeker and having that be the biggest longing of your life. It understands all these different layers and stratas of the journey that is the human journey too.
totally.
So it and it doesn't see it as a hierarchy even. It's part of its larger body. You know what I mean? It loves all of
It
it
includes
as
everything,
itself.
yeah, it includes everything, including the stuff that was, like all the shifts
Mhm.
and everything. Like to me, that's like none of that
Mhm.
is um like none of that is lost. But like as soon as I hear the word hierarchy, like I get like allergic reaction to it.
Good.
Because, do you know what I mean? No, I'm kidding, but like I really, like, I can see, I can, that was another shock I think that I experienced when I entered the non-dual territory,
Mm.
in like the knowledge that it really felt like, the progress, and like how much of that language, it almost felt like, oh, if I've had that shift, then I'm here, and if you haven't had that shift yet, then you're here. And all of a sudden, the stages of awakening, rather than just being a reference point, and maybe even a useful reference point, like why
Yep.
not, all of a sudden becomes something else, like the special nest contest, or something like that. I mean,
Getting
it's all
little
little
medals.
medals of little attainments. I got there, and like whatever. And again, I'm not. I'm genuinely not saying this like. I get that because this is like so human, you know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
totally reminds me of the point at which I thought I arrived and I
The
could put
only
the
way we
badge
could
on this,
even
right?
laugh about it, Maggie, is if we knew it in ourselves at one
Yeah,
point.
totally. That's it. That's it. That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
sure.
And I'll tell maybe I can just I know that we're probably running out of time here a
Yeah,
little bit, but
it's fine.
it's actually one of the most, I may be terrible in trying to talk about liberation in terms of like, in a way that some people can really do a much better job than I do, including yourself. What I love to talk about is how it impacts the day-to-day life, that because to me, ultimately, you can have mind-blowing shifts, and amazing experiences, and that's lovely. But what does it do? Ultimately, what does it do in your day-to-day life? What does it do in your dynamics with your family or with your friends or
Mhm,
you know what I mean? And it's like for me, speaking
mhm,
of the awakening journey, it one of the hardest parts of that awakening journey for me was
mhm.
actually meeting my own um like the things that in other words the things that I used to despise in other people, the things that I used to judge people harshly and feel very self-righteous in the process and feel very I'm so noble and I'm such a good person and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, from that kind of I call it like a high horse, right?
Yeah,
And I was confronted with like seeing a lot of those things in myself at some point.
sure.
And it was incredibly painful. And I remember that because it was a shock because I didn't realize the extent to which I was bullshitting myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so basically that was incredibly painful. But the
Yeah.
reason why to me it was as important as any so-called mind-blowing, because
Yeah.
by I was humbled by life like to my knees, when seeing certain qualities in myself for the first time that I didn't want to see.
Yeah.
But it really closed the gap between me and another person. Even that,
Mm.
because I could no longer don't like of course I'll see behaviors and of course I will point them out and of course there are behaviors that anger me or even piss me off or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But there's almost like I'm not a part. I don't see myself apart because I've seen it all in me. Okay,
Yeah.
it may not be expressed in such a extreme way. It may not be in such a violent way. It may not be this overt, but did I lie in my lifetime? Yes, I lied. Was I dishonest in my lifetime? Yes, I was. Did I manipulate my way into things or
Mhm.
whatever? Yes, I have. So,
Sure.
it's like, so in my
Yeah.
point is that this was the most humbling experience because then
Yes.
you cut people slack by virtue of just seeing this humanness,
Hmm.
this aspect of human those aspects of your humanness. I don't know how to explain this, but this is one of the greatest thing that like you're just seeing people differently and there's a different kind of compassion that comes out of that. So you can literally despise somebody's behavior and
Mhm.
still have that kind of compassion that I'm talking about
Yeah.
toward that
Yeah.
same
Absolutely.
person.
Yeah.
But you don't work at it. It's not it emerges out of that humble experience, out of
Yeah.
that rather than something, oh my God, I have to be a compassionate person. And you know what I mean? It's not a
Sure.
project to become a
No.
compassionate person. It's like very
Yeah.
natural because
It
you've
feels
really
like an
seen it.
understanding. For me, it's like we have an understanding.
Mm,
And that understanding brings about the compassion. The understanding is we know that for ourselves. We understand how ignorance can work, how unconsciousness can work, how confusion can work, right? So there's an
Yep.
understanding which doesn't give them a pass,
Nope. Nope.
but it's an understanding of human nature, of how we even can be that way.
Yes.
It's been met here. It's been met here. And as you say, it's incredibly humbling.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
Spiritual
Yeah.
poverty, they say, it's like that's what the spiritual poverty is, when Jesus was talking about in Christianity and the Gnostic and the beautiful part of Christianity that I love, there's something called spiritual poverty.
Oh,
And it's
remind me
it's
what that
it's
is.
it's it's when we are truly humbled
Right.
and we're poor inside. We don't have riches, falseness, false
Mm-hmm.
riches,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
false beliefs that we are better than, that
Yeah.
we're better than anybody.
Yeah.
Like when you go to the grocery store and you see different people, and there used to be maybe in the past some idea of just sort of an entitlement or feeling
Mm-hmm.
better than. It's just sort of ingrained, that
Been
gets
there, done
out.
that.
Me too, me too. And
Yeah.
that gets humbled, and then
Mm.
the gap closes between you and others, where you really are, yourself as a global body, one body that has different
Yeah.
types of confusions and ignorances and whatevers and action and activity. So
Mm.
the humbleness is there, and it's almost like that's one thing that happens when you deeply wake up, really deeply, is that you wouldn't ever want that to come back, to ever feel like you're better than anybody. You wouldn't want that. It's too painful. It creates
Yeah.
separation, and that
It's
separation
such
hurts.
separation. It's such separation, And I
Yeah,
think a lot of that compassion um comes up of like when that sense of separation dissolves in your experience and you see that that was the source of so much suffering, then you cannot help but feel that same
yeah.
thing for other people. It's like, oh, I vividly remember. I mean, I had such a massive heart opening that accompanied that
Mm,
like I remember I just wanted to bow down in like I wanted to get on my knees and bow down in front of every human being because I was like seeing God
mm,
and who forgot. Do you know what I mean?
God who
Forgot.
forgot.
Yeah, God who forgot. And I just wanted to like it's like I would rather sit with like the most ordinary person and talk to them all day than talk to like listen to some super eloquent spiritual teacher. And again, I'm not saying that like there's anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with super eloquent. I actually am a fan of a couple of really eloquent spiritual teachers, so nothing wrong with that. But
No, no.
I was at the point where like just the ordinariness of life, the human pain, there was like I couldn't help but see God in it as it, and that
Well,
was powerful.
there's something to be said. Sorry to interrupt. There's something to
No,
be
no.
said about a human being letting themselves be a human being. And they're not pretending to be above suffering. They're not pretending to be someone who doesn't have grief about their loss. They're just like here with that. And they don't even realize that that's already amazing. That's so far along, just to be willing to be
Oh man.
here.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I hear you saying, is like to be with somebody who is willing to be a human being and just sit with their pain and just be honest and just say, I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm not pretending I'm not aging. I'm not pretending that this divorce doesn't hurt, or that the world, the way it is, it doesn't affect me. But but even with that level of acceptance, they're already rising above it, in the sense that they're opening to something more true, which is something that unifies us. We're also unified in our humanness, right? Not just in the spiritual. You and I and everybody listening, we're unified in this beautiful spiritual world that we are in love with, that has truth to it. We're also unified in our humanness, and the fact that we all are experiencing different painful things in life.
Yeah.
Life's not necessarily easy.
I mean, to me, that honesty is awakening itself. You know, that kind of raw,
Yeah.
honest
Oh,
expression of what's happening in the moment without filters, without, oh
yes.
my God, what he's gonna think about me, or, you know, whatever. It's like and I think that this is why, and that's I'm so grateful that we met, and you know, because, and I know that there are teachers that I don't think they're doing it on purpose or anything like that, but I vividly remember, you know, like those moments. Now that we talked about it, I remember the first time I've heard a teacher talk about their own suffering, like something happened in their life,
Mm,
and they just honestly talked about it.
mm.
And I was like, everybody had like this massive sigh of relief.
Oh,
You know what I
good.
mean? It was like a
Yay.
collective sigh. Oh my God, he's like, and this is to me what the closing
Mm,
of this stupid gap between this manufactured, and again, I'm not saying on purpose, I'm not saying that someone is maliciously setting
yeah.
up to do this, okay? Because
Yeah.
like the teachers project and the students project, so it's like a game that works both
Oh,
ways, you
yeah.
know.
That's a whole nother conversation, Maggie.
Maybe we can do a conversation
Yeah.
on that, but I just want to say that there's something, so I remember that part of my journey actually was because I had like a really profound, my first awakening. And then I was in this like equanimity for nearly 3 years. And then all of a sudden I plunged into this massive suffering. And I had no idea why this was happening. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was like, why?
Sure.
And that thought, this should not be happening, was literally at the core of my suffering in that moment, because that's all I
Oh,
thought. This should not be happening, you know?
yeah.
But my point is that then I was like,
Mm,
was drawn to looking about for videos about awakening, and I didn't know what I was looking for or why, because I didn't want, I was so disappointed with anything awakening and transcendental. I just didn't want to hear anybody. And what I realized that what I was looking for teachers who
mm,
would talk about their humanness. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Sure.
Because I felt so much that um I remember I often wondered, like listening to certain teachers of like, do they have problems in their marriage? Do they still argue? You know, like I mean,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
still had this kind of do they still
Yeah.
get anxious or nervous if they come on a stage, for example? Like I had these like simple
Yeah.
human. I was looking for humanness in that transcendence that they were talking
That
about.
makes sense. I
You
did the
know?
same. I did the same. So when I started to teach, I decided to do it differently. And not share and everything, not share like, just
Yeah,
like
I know what
vomiting
you
in the
mean.
room
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
no, but
Let
just
me tell you about my
yeah,
day.
right, right, right. It's so hard. No, because it's got to be integrated where it's useful.
Mm-hmm,
Because I
mm-hmm.
remember I actually said in different satsangs and whatever, I'd come out and say, when I started talking after our meditation, I just want to share with you that when I first got here, I was really nervous. But what I did is, as soon as I welcomed it, opened to it, it's here and and here I am, and it's not taking center stage anymore. Just to give a teaching with the honesty.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, I wasn't expecting them to like share the gossip of the day, or like, you know what I mean? Like getting
Well,
into
maybe a
their
little,
personal,
maybe a
maybe
little.
a
No,
little,
just
okay? No, but like the personal business, okay, they could like,
yeah,
okay, a little bit. No,
yeah,
thank you
yeah,
for
yeah.
calling me out on that one.
No, no,
No,
I
no,
did
no,
the
seriously, no,
same. I did
seriously,
the
no, I'm kidding.
same.
I'm kidding. Who doesn't like a
Yeah,
bit of a gossip? But
yeah.
you know, but my point is that this is so important, because I think that even by doing that, by bringing this and even if they're not genuinely experiencing any nervousness, for example, anymore, that's fine. Then talk about what that used to be like, or talk
Yeah.
about, you know, like whatever. My point is that
Mm,
this is so easy then, because I know for the fact through the people that I'm seeing
mm,
that there's still this gap of the teacher sitting on the podium, on a stage or whatever, and
Yeah.
like not talking about that human aspect of their experience. And so right
Yeah.
there, there's this gap. Oh, they must have something that I don't have. Or they
Absolutely.
must be over certain things. And again, I'm not saying
Yes.
that they're doing this on purpose. There's time and place to talk about these things as well. So I recognize, the nuance and the context and all of that. But
Hmm.
I think I've seen it multiple times. People like, oh my God, have you heard this teacher? Like he said, like he had this problem with whatever, or like whether it was health or whether this was in marriage or whether this was in a difficult dynamic with the family or,
Hmm.
but again, like you said, weaving it into, whatever the teaching was. And I think that that alone, this heartfelt honest sharing, like to
Yes.
me that heartfelt honest sharing can be sometimes more powerful of a teaching than a teaching itself, about the
I understand what you're saying completely. And it's also for an education for the student to stop projecting on the teacher their own ideas of perfection. Because when the teacher finally says, or here and there peppers their real life experience, you
mm-hmm.
take them down a notch in there and say, oh, they're still suffering in
Yeah,
some way.
they're not awake,
They're not
they're
awake.
fraud, or
They
yeah,
lost it. They
yeah,
come down, from the heights. So it's an
yeah,
education, but I think it's an important one. I think it's super important for our current evolution, for our spiritual time right now, is everything
mm-hmm.
that you've just been talking about, Maggie, and what you're doing with your channel is humanizing. And it's to take away the ideas, the false ideas of what spiritual realization really is. It is so healthy and it's so important and a value. So people can and then include their own selves and they don't have to be perfect. You're not going to ever be perfect. And still you're
Yeah,
that. Still you're
yes,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's only when we bring this to the table that we talk the talk. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
because right, because you can sort of talk about it, but it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to actually be that and, and do that and everything.
and
So
and
you
and
like
share here and there, share
yeah.
here and there. Most people that come to my work, they don't want to know all about my life, but they want to
Are
know
you
that
sure?
well, I have a tell-all. No, I don't. Book. No,
No, I see what
it
you mean. Yeah.
really what it is, they're coming for themselves to wake
Mm-hmm.
up
Mm-hmm.
or to
Mm-hmm.
deepen and
Of course.
integrate, right?
Yeah.
But if they can get a taste of some of the humanness, which is even just being self-effacing, laughing about yourself, not taking yourself seriously, if it's peppered in the teaching, right? Because that's really who one is it they get it.
Yeah.
It's translated that we're still human and that human is divine and it's going to mess up at times and even maybe lo and behold, say something that is awkward,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's better for everybody to have that big sigh of relief that you
And I
mentioned.
would even say it's really like I also say, because again, I'm saying this purely because I've had that experience of how valuable was. I didn't have much kind of one-on-one or even in person, just online contact with a teacher, but I had enough to expose my projections, you know,
Hmm.
of what they should be like. And that was incredibly teachable. Like
Yeah.
my projections were completely like I remember one teacher and I thought that they were moody. And I thought, oh my God, she's moody. Like, how could she be moody? You know what I mean? Like, don't enlightened people are enlightened people like shouldn't they not be moody or something? I mean, the most ridiculous kind of things, but I'm saying it's really useful
Yeah.
to just even be aware. What am I projecting on this teacher? What am I projecting on this person? What am I
Oh, yeah.
expecting them to be, right? Because we're not asking ourselves these questions,
It's a
you
very
know?
important thing, and it's something that is worthy of a, and I'm not saying that we need to have that conversation, but I think it is a whole conversation on
I would
itself.
love to have that conversation with you
Yeah.
all because you've been, sorry, for a lack of a better word, in this business,
Yeah, I'm in the business.
in this
It's a
business, you know what I mean?
mafia. It's a mafia.
It's a mafia. No, but
Don't say anything wrong.
no, but I would love to have this conversation. So I'm not gonna go there. But I think actually, what I'm going to say is that
Mhm.
I think it's really important to talk about it because there's a whole lot happening around awakening, people awakening, and all sorts of things, and all sorts of teachers, and all sorts of things being said, you know? And
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's so easy to lose. I can see how confusing it might get, and how this is one of the reasons why I also love talking to you because you always talk about going back to you, you know? Go back to you. Go listen, go explore, go learn, go listen to teachers, go explore different teachers, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But ultimately, keep on coming back to
Mhm.
yourself. I mean that to me
Yeah.
this is like the like when I see you, to me this is like I would say that whenever I think that, it's like I associated with that. That's, yeah, so much of your message, right?
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm not going to go on anymore, but I just say the reason is because that's what I did for myself. And that's what
Yeah.
so, they say teach what you know.
Yeah.
Teach what you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I value that. Yeah.
Well,
Wow. It's
that
fun
was
being with
lovely
you.
and fun. So yeah,
Yeah.
we will definitely have to schedule another conversation. I'm aware how vast of a topic this is around just teachers, the teacher-student dynamic. But the reason why I would love to talk to you about it, one, because you've been on this journey for a long time. You've met different teachers, but also you're a teacher yourself. So I would love to hear what that experience been like for you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that would be amazing, actually. So we'll do that. And in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoy the
Thank
conversation. Please
you.
let us know what resonated with you in the comments. And actually, if you have any specific questions or topics that you might want us to explore again, then let us know in the comments as well, because then maybe we can do that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. We can weave
Um,
it in.
we
Yeah.
can weave it in. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Take care.
Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.